What is up, night crawlers? Welcome back to the Nightmare's Edge. Thank you so much for dropping in. I truly appreciate you doing so. Today, I have 7 eerie tales of the Shadowman. A special thank you to the authors for allowing me to narrate their experiences. The links to their stories will be listed in the description. And as always, if you have any information that might shine some light on these situations, please feel free to pass that information along, either to the author or to me, and I will pass that along myself. Now, sit back, relax, and let me tickle your inner fears. My Encounter with the Cursed Object by EggManTheGod. Hello. When it comes to Reddit, I'm usually just a watcher, never posting much but checking in pretty often. However, I've been encouraged to share my story by many friends who I've told it to in person. My encounter, 3 years ago, is still one I have trouble thinking or looking back on. Anyway, a little background on me and my roommate and the story. We were both practicing Christians, so I do believe in the spiritual side, demons and such. But I had never had any encounters I deemed supernatural per se. That all changed for me 3 years ago. We were living in a small apartment at the time where me and my roommate, let's call him Joe for now, lived at the time. His girlfriend had just gotten back from a mission trip to Haiti and brought home a gift for me. This gift was a crudely wooden carved elephant that she was gifted from a Haitian child. This thing was freaking creepy. It just gave off an eerie vibe by looking at it. Clearly hand carved, with not the best craftsmanship, it was unsettling to look at. However, Joe, being a good boyfriend, graciously accepted the gift. I somewhat jokingly, but also seriously expressed how I did not like the mojo surrounding this thing. He basically explained he thought it was weird, but it was a gift, so he was going to keep it. And at that, keep it in our room. Later that night, I received an unusual text from my neighbor who lived across the hall. We were friends, but never really texted, so this just struck me as odd when she asked, "Are you okay?" I was in the living room watching a movie at the time, so I replied, "Yeah, just relaxing, watching TV." Met with a response, "Oh, just pulled in and thought I saw you in your room pacing back and forth." My heart dropped. I was home alone at the time. And I immediately ran into my room to find nothing but stillness. I made a glance at the wood-carved monstrosity, which also felt as if it were staring back, then closed the door. Now unsettled, but not completely startled. A couple hours later, it was time for bed. By this time, my roommate had already returned. I told him about the text, but he mainly brushed it off. I've never been a great sleeper, so this experience didn't help get me into a state of rest. However, eventually my mind drifted asleep. This sleep did not last long. A feeling that I'd never felt before came over me. My eyes felt as if they were glued open, and I didn't even notice myself blinking. My body was strapped to the bed, not being able to move any appendage. All I had control over was my eyes. I immediately looked at my roommate across the room, who was dead asleep, with all my might trying to let out anything from my mouth, but not even a whimper. My eyes then looked at the foot of my bed to see a sight that gripped me with a curling fear. An imposing outline of nothing but black. So black, it stood out among the rest of the darkness. There was not a face, no true shape, just a vague structure of a humanoid creature that looked as if it was a void absorbing darkness and growing even blacker by the second. I moved my eyes up to try and avoid the thing, but it was so tall it was hard not to see it. Then it felt as if my chest was crushing. Looking down to the pressure on my chest, it now appeared the thing was coming over me. It wasn't crawling over my bed, more as if it was just levitating, closer and closer, and closer and closer, until I was forced to stare at nothing but the void before me, what I presumed to be this creature's face. There was no emotion, no noise, no nothing, just darkness. And when I think back to this, that's what churns my stomach. The lack of anything is something I had never experienced. I don't remember the thing leaving or me falling asleep. I just woke up in the morning. Naturally, thinking my mind had just dreamt up a terrible nightmare, I was still shaken. However, when I looked to the floor of the room and saw that the wood-carved creature had fallen off its shelf and rolled a solid 3 feet to the foot of my bed, I felt ill from the fear. I immediately decided the events were connected. I have never suffered from sleep paralysis before, or after this event. We got rid of the wooden elephant, then blessed each room of the house and had no issues until we moved out. I truly believe this wood-carved object had something attached to it. I'm not very informed on this subject, but it was of Haitian descent, so my first thought was voodoo. This is my only ever encounter of this type, so please let me know if you'll have any more information or similar stories. Thanks for listening to my story. Sorry if my writing was sloppy. I've never made a post close to this long before. My Childhood Protector, Svennit, by dykejoon. Repost. Since I talked to my family about Svennit, and they corrected some details and gave me new info. My childhood home was a suburban brick, built in the early 90s, was the model home for the neighborhood. Cheerful yellow planks with deep red shutters. Finished, fully lit basement. Inaccessible attic, open and bright and airy. Unassuming, idyllic, and perfect to raise your children in. I adored my house. I never felt anything but safe there. I was never given any reason to be afraid of any part of it. My family is particularly spiritually sensitive, I'd say. We've all had our own paranormal experiences and a servable sixth sense. Nothing crazy, no hauntings or curses or mysterious deaths. We're just a bit more tapped into that sort of stuff than others. We've got our stories, our secrets, just like everybody else. In the past, I've heard a lot of warnings online about tall shadow people in hats. They're an omen, demonic, dangerous, bad news. If I saw one, I should worry. My tall man wasn't like that. I'm not sure what Svennit was hanging around for, but I'm almost certain that he wasn't out to hurt me, or warn me of something, or even scare me. His presence in my home wasn't even alarming to me. When I caught sight of him, I greet him verbally by name, and go about my business. He wasn't a hallucination or a trick of the light. I'm almost sure. He appeared in my peripheral vision, and I often turned to face him. Blink or turn away and turn back, he'd still be there. He came and went as he pleased. He had no set schedule. He showed when he showed, day or night, rain or shine. He always stood in my doorway, as tall as the door was, one hand on the frame as he ducked into my room, frozen mid-step. The outline of his fedora was always visible. Milady? He had no discernible features. He was a shadow, black and bottomless. I mostly saw him head on, although a couple times he had already been in my doorway when I tried to come in, and I'd be able to scoot past him into my room simply by walking under his arm. He was super gangly. He was nameless for a couple years, but one day I woke up and knew with certainty that his name was Svennit, like he had whispered into my ear while I was sleeping. He always got kind of pissy when I tried to explore. I would shine a flashlight at him to see if the light would reveal something or reflect back, and he'd disappear in the space between blinks. Same if I noticed him and walked around trying to see him from a different angle, tried to touch him, or got particularly close at all. He didn't seem to mind the ducking under his arm to get into my room bit though. Like he understood it was a necessity and he didn't want to be a nuisance. I spoke to my little sister about it and she says she saw him too, but far less than I did. My room was his favorite haunt, apparently. My oldest cousin says that when she visited and slept in my room, she often woke to him standing at the foot of the bed we were sharing, just watching. Instead of crippling fear, she felt peace and would fall back asleep quickly. I have horrible night terrors and issues with disturbing dreams, but on the days I spotted Svennit, I usually slept soundly and had fairly pleasant dreams, which are a rarity for me. Coincidence? Maybe. But we coexisted very well. He kept me safe and was definitely looking out for me, for his own reasons. We moved out of my childhood home about a year ago now. I haven't seen Svennit since. I think he was tied to that house somehow, although I have no idea how. There's no history behind it to explore. The neighborhood was built on Kickapoo in Miami land, but that's about it. My mama says he was drawn to me, not the house. But if that were the case, wouldn't he have followed me when we moved? Anyone else have an experience like this? I want to compare notes. Encounter with a Shadow Stranger by MissMadificent. I only very recently recalled this memory. This is the only time in my life that I experienced something like this. I've never ever hallucinated before either. Perhaps it can be explained, but I haven't been able to figure out how. Maybe you will. I live in Hawaii on the island of Kauai, and am a 28-year-old female. Approximately 20 years ago, I was on the island of Oahu visiting family on my father's side. I stayed at my auntie's house with her rather large Samoan boyfriend. She was about 5 foot and on the chunky side. She has a daughter, my cousin, who was the same age as me and standing at an average 8-year-old girl's height. You'll see why this information matters. They lived in this neighborhood called Wilhelmina Rise on the bottom floor of a 2-story house. It was set up almost like a fairly spacious studio, where the only room was the bathroom. Otherwise, you could see everything in the studio in its entirety no matter where you were standing. There were 2 queen-size beds several feet from each other, one closest to the TV and the other closest to the back wall. I was sleeping in the bed furthest from the TV, on the inside, having the wall closest to me, and my cousin was sleeping next to me on the outside. My auntie and her boyfriend, of course, were sleeping in the other bed. I want to say it was somewhere between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. when I suddenly woke up. I don't know if I had to use the bathroom or if something disrupted my sleep, but I could see the kitchen when I opened my eyes. I propped myself up onto my elbow to see over my peacefully slumbering cousin. I was puzzled at first as something caught my eye. I thought, I'm just imagining things, as I began to rub my eyes and hoping to be rid of whatever was causing the potential illusion. I look up from my hands, knowing it'd be gone because the explanation was that my eyes were likely just blurry, causing me to see imaginary things, right? That's what everyone else would expect when something like this happens to someone, isn't it? But that isn't what happened. Not in this universe. After rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I look up again, and it's in the same spot as it had been. The next step is to pinch yourself, right? That's exactly what I did. Pinch, pinch, pinch on my forearm as hard as I could, to where I had to rub the pain away. Definitely awake. That is definitely standing there. My 8-year-old mind was trying to make sense of what was playing out, but it couldn't. I can't explain the confusion I felt, knowing things weren't adding up when they should be. This doesn't actually happen, except it was happening and there was no explanation. Towering in the kitchen was what looked like to be a male on the slimmer side. If you took notice to the description of everyone staying in the apartment earlier, you'll understand why it was such a brain twister for me. Who is that? I asked myself silently. It stood with his back towards me at the kitchen sink. I stared at it, trying to make out any sort of detail that should have been illuminated by the dim stove light that was left on. The longer I looked at it, the less sense it made. I began to realize, aside from it being in my kitchen, something was off about it. Why couldn't I see any details? Why can't I even see the clothing it's wearing, or the color of its skin? It was as if it were encompassed by a dark, deep, shadowy black. It was a silhouette. What does that even mean? My 8-year-old mind had no idea. I didn't know that shadow people were a thing back then. I wasn't even thinking about ghosts and paranormal things at the time. I was clueless and didn't know what I was dealing with until very recently. The weirdest thing is that when I first looked at it, within that second, my half-asleep brain recognized it as my grandma, until I looked harder and made sense of where I actually was. That didn't make sense for a lot of reasons. The main two being, she's my mom's mom, therefore having no relation to anyone here except me. She was still alive and well on my home island at the time. She didn't pass away until about a decade after this incident. After I glanced over at my aunt and her enormous boyfriend sleeping where they're supposed to be, I glanced at the front door thinking maybe someone broke in. From where I was, I could see that the chain was still on the door. So was the heavy-duty padlock, meaning that the only way that locked door is opening is from the inside. The only window in her place was still intact as well. My heart was pounding at this point, and the figure still hadn't moved at all. I rubbed my eyes and pinched myself one last time, hoping I was dreaming. Please, I thought to myself, as I slowly started to lower my body back onto the mattress, keeping my eyes on whatever it was that refused to go away. Please keep us safe and don't let anyone see anything. I stealthily flipped on my other side to face the wall and pulled the covers over my head. I didn't care how hot it was. I was not going to see the face of this thing, nor was I going to feel, hear, or witness anything it ends up doing. I silently prayed more to my parents as God and had so much fear and adrenaline coursing through me, I thought I would never end up falling asleep. I genuinely had it in my mind that something was about to happen to me. Miracles do happen, as after a millennia passed, I did indeed fall asleep through the rest of the night, without any further disturbances. I don't recall what happened the following day, but all I know is nothing was out of place. No evidence of someone MacGyvering their way into the house, and no one else mentioned anything about what I saw. I tell my dad's mom about this recently, and she genuinely believes that I'm sensitive to anything spiritual or paranormal. She has her reasons, but that's another story. For some reason, I haven't been able to find it in me to agree with her about being sensitive. Maybe it's because I fear these types of encounters, so I consciously shut this stuff out. Maybe because I'm just too skeptical. All I know is I'd like to never experience seeing a spooky spectral stranger in the middle of the night, ever again. Scary Shaddow Person. This just happened. I'm freaking out. By ArsenicRainbows. Okay, my heart is going so fast, I'm shaking, so I'm sorry if I mistype. It's 3:47 a.m. as I write this. I have often seen shapes in the dark that look like hooded figures or like a black mass. I've always felt a little creeped out by them, but just figured it was my brain playing tricks, trying to fill in the blank space. I've also had sleep paralysis before, seen a ghost in a hat and trench coat, and have had items move right in front of me, with witnesses. But this is something I have never had happen before. I woke up randomly 47 minutes ago, at 3 a.m. like I do most nights. I noticed a black mass in the corner of the room. It stood up. It was 7 feet tall at least, with an oval-shaped head, pronounced shoulders, long arms, and equally long legs. It was thin, tall, and stood straight, just looking at me. Had no face, just a black void. It turned to the right, bent down, and I, at first calmly, asked my fiancée to turn on the light. Then it stood back up and walked to the right side of the room, my side of the bedroom. It leaned over the bed as though checking the sheets, then stood up again and walked to the bottom of the bed. At this point, I'm going crazy, shouting, "Turn on your light," as this thing starts crawling up the bed towards me. Edit, update. I have spoken to my significant other about me trying to wake him up. He said he heard me the first time but couldn't see anything, was half asleep, and it took him a minute or so to 1. Wake up, and 2. Find his watch, which has a torch on it, and was on the floor, and it was dark and in the middle of the night. Then, once the light went on, it vanished, but I had been hiding under the covers and my fiancé had to bring a lamp into the room, so I didn't have to sit in the dark. I can't sleep with the light on, but right now, I'm too scared. Can someone tell me what on earth I've just witnessed? And any suggestions are welcome on how I might get it to leave. Update. I think I've made it angry. I can hear shuffling around the bed, but nothing's there. And I just heard a whisper in a feminine voice. It's just me and my fiancé in here, and he's asleep. Update 2. It's 3:44 when I woke up tonight. It's the following night to the story I mentioned above, 4 a.m. as I write this. I heard a slamming door in the hallway. I have checked, but everyone is in bed. Luckily, I haven't seen anything yet tonight, possibly because I have the light on. And I have taken countermeasures. Nothing in my room tonight, thankfully, but I still feel like I'm being watched. Tall Shadow Figure with a Smile by Viper on Fire. Last night, I was staying out all night with my girlfriend. This is the second time we've done it. We went to this shed place in a park. Let me describe it to you. It's roughly 6 by 3 meters with open doors on both sides, and the walls have little open plank bits in them and circular plastic windows. We had put a blanket down on the floor and used our bags as pillows. We also had another weighted blanket over us. Anyway, we were both laying down with our eyes closed, cuddling, when suddenly we hear that like a cartoon sound, almost like in a kid's cartoon. We peek our heads up and we see out the window. There's this really tall black figure. Keep in mind, we both don't know it's really tall yet. I'll specify in a second. With literally no definition on its body, just a pitch black figure, and the only thing you can see is a wide, white smile. It's staring at us, and it's got its long arms slightly outstretched from its sides. As soon as we both look at it, it's like its smile disappears, and now it's walking away to our left in an almost marching motion. We didn't even see it turn its body. It walks into a blind spot, which was because there was a little wooden wall in the way there, and we both peer out the door expecting to see it carry on walking out of the blind spot, and it's just gone. We both think it's really weird, but shrug it off as just a person in the park opening the gates or something. A few minutes later, we hear those exact same cartoon sounds, and this time we're paranoid, so we investigate. We realize where it was standing before it walked away was next to the support beam for a zip line. This support beam had to be at least 12 feet tall. We didn't realize this figure was so tall at first because the plastic window we saw him through was warped, making the structure and figure seem smaller. This is when we both start to freak out, because of the fact that it could have been the Shadowman that has haunted us both. Earlier that night, we sat in the woods maybe 2 or 3 miles away from the park. We're talking, and all of a sudden I'm paranoid because I kept hearing branches snap, and could have swore I saw movement in the corner of my eye. This makes me think about the Shadowman who's been randomly appearing at times in my life, whether it's daylight or not. I tell my girlfriend, and before I mention that it's a tall black shadow figure, she says, "Oh, please don't go there." I say, "Tall black shadow figure?" And she says yes, and explains how she used to see it every day, in the daytime peering at her from behind a tree, roughly 5 times per day. I could tell when I described the figure, she was genuinely surprised to hear that I had the same experience. Is it a coincidence that I have a run-in with the figure the same day I'm talking about it? Did I manifest it back into existence? Or was it listening to me talking about it? I Don't Believe in the Paranormal, But by The Crawling Chaos. I don't believe in the paranormal, but a curious thing just happened to me. Well, it's almost 9 p.m., it's already dark, and my parents are not home. I was quietly in the kitchen listening to music with my headphones and eating something standing up. It all happened so fast. I turned my head slightly to the side, and I swear on my life, I saw a person-sized figure a couple of meters away from me. I freaked out a little, but the thought came to me that it was my mother, only to realize that my parents are not home. It all happened in a matter of a second, and when I looked again, there was nothing. To expand on that, what I saw during that instant was a blur-sized figure of an adult. I emphasize that. It looked like a blur rather than something physical. It was white, and on top of its body, on the head part, the blur was black. Do you understand? As if it had clothes from the neck down. And that's why there was a contrast between the color of its face and the clothes. It wasn't something I saw out of the corner of my eye. I saw it in the center of my vision from a slight movement. Right outside the kitchen door. Everything was illuminated. It was not a visual confusion. I just wanted to tell. I'm not even scared now. I've already said I'm skeptical, but that moment was creepy. I thought some of you would enjoy the story. I saw a figure. In a split second, it was gone. By the man himself, 564. So a little background info. Earlier, in 2021, my family decided to go to Charleston, South Carolina. Hearing that there's an aircraft carrier there, I'm a World War II person. I wanted to take a tour, so we dedicated a day so I could with my family. We were in the chain locker. I don't know if it was called that. I was first in, so last out. We were walking in there for about 5 minutes and talking to the guide about the ship's history. Upon walking out, I saw an intersection of 3 corridors, one facing me and 2 crossing. I didn't notice it before, and studied it for a second before I turned my head to go to the room. A black figure ran through the corridors like a drill was happening. Though this ship is sitting in mud, I got out quick and went to the front. This was the USS Yorktown. It has a history for being haunted by figures dating back to the 1940s. Several YouTube videos on it are available. All the figures that have been seen, late at night particularly, a few shadows running like the ship was under attack. I don't think I'll be doing that again for a while. It was a really cool place to visit if you like history. Thank you all again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Again, check the description for the links to each story, and if you have any information, definitely feel free to pass it on. Thank you. But until next time, remember, just because you couldn't see it, doesn't mean it wasn't watching you.